So last video, we learned shading is really just about value. How light and dark work together to make something feel real. We shaded a sphere in the last video. We drew a value scale, and hopefully you guys did your homework and actually got better at this. But the thing is, the sphere is just the beginning, because in real life, like in portraits, figures, objects, things like that, nothing is just a sphere or just something simple like that. They're complex. Things have corners, curves, edges, everything all at once. So today, we're going to dive deeper. We're going to be looking at three fundamental forms that every single thing in the world is built from. If we're including sphere, that's four. So there's the sphere, the cube, the cylinder, and the cone. These are the essential. Master these four and understand how life is, and you're pretty much a pro. Before you draw a single thing, I just want you to look around your room. Pick up an object, like this ruler right here. A cup, a phone, a bottle, a book. It doesn't really matter. But when you look at it, just squint your eyes until it like slightly blurs. And what do you see? Not in details, obviously, not like the color, the label, but rather look at the shape. Is it rounded? Is it boxy? Or is it a combination of both? Think about that. And that's what really what an artist sees. Always. That's what they see when they see something. That's how they break down complicated things. Every complex thing is just simple forms just stuck together. Like a cube, maybe a cone, some cylinders, things like that. A finger is a sort of a cylinder. If you think about it, this can be broken down into three major parts. And the nose is like a small sphere with two half spheres on either side. Once you see the world this way, drawing stops becoming scary and it just becomes like a puzzle. You already know how to solve, it's just more about connecting the pieces. So let's start meeting the forms. So we're going to be starting off with cubes. The opposite of sphere, what we started last time. It's the opposite. Instead of some no edges and smooth transitions, it's going to be rock hard edges with sudden transitions. Sudden. So let's draw one, or at least you guys should draw one. I have a few here, but they're based on perspective. Obviously, you don't need to have them completely followed to the T, but it's best to have them accurate as possible. So we'll firstly assume that the light source is right here, okay? And that means this side right over here, which we can't see, is going to be the lightest, right? This will be slightly medium tone, and this will be the lightest out of these three that we could see. Because since the light is coming from an upper angle, the top is going to be the most exposed to this light, meaning it's going to be the brightest. And the side that's opposite is going to be the darkest. This is the same idea we followed last time in our sphere video, and we just got to do that right now. So now that we're done shading it, I'll explain it a little bit more. So this is the top face. This face is pointing mostly directly at the light, so it gets the highest value. I'm leaving this mostly white because it's just the faintest tone to separate it from the paper. And then this is the left side, which catches some light, but it's angled in a way where it's a medium value because it's like still looking away from the main source of the light. So roughly like 3 out of 5 on the value scale. And then the right face, this right here is the darkest one. And this one's completely facing away from light, so as a result, it'll be the darkest. Obviously, you can leave that little slight little light at the bottom where the shadow should be, but it's really not needed to put the shadow right now, as I'm only trying to explain just the basics of the cube. So now we're on the cylinder. cylinder is a funny shape, okay? It definitely still follows the same rules, but it's a weird mix. It's a weird mix of the cube with the edges, but also the curves of the sphere. So right over here, I'm just fixing up a quick little cylinder. Right over here, that should be fine. So I'm going to assume light is coming from the direction of, say, the camera. So think of a light just shining down through the center of this. And you'd think, oh, so it would just be really bright from the middle and dark from the sides. Well, it's sort of right. So towards this bottom part, that rule would apply. So the sides would be darker because it's obviously a curved thing. So much darker here, and then they'll slowly fade out. Slowly fade out. Maybe I think I did this. Let me drag this up a bit. There we go. That should be fine. However, as for the top, it comes back to the cube, a flat surface. And as we know, the light is facing from the top, which would mean this flat area right over here would be mostly white, or at least bright. You'll have very slight shades on the sides, very slightly, just to show that it still has some shadow, but it's generally keeps this very light shading. There you go. That's the cylinder. And we can also do that for this one over here. We'll assume the light's coming from like diagonal, say like right over here. Same rule. You just curve this up like this. Show that it's curved. Shade it in. Slowly go lighter and lighter. Value scale, remember that. Keep that with you. And then I'll just make a slight little that. And I'll actually dull up this line and then just make it really bright right here. Just with the eraser. Very easy. And boom. Fixing up the shape. And voila! We have the shape practically done. Same thing stands. The flats right over here will have sharper and more consistent colors, while the curves will have more gradients rather than these sudden and solid colors. And now on the cone. The cone, you see, it's surprisingly useful, especially with things like portraits, where you kind of get the idea of like the nose or sharper and pointier objects you see in your life. And this one is kind of, are actually really similar to the cylinder, as it uses the idea of the curves and a very sharp line or a white you would see depending on where the source is coming from, because it follows the curvature order. So if the light were to come from like the side from here and pointing like a shining light from here, it would be like that. So you would, as a result, based on what shape it is, you would circle around just like this. And I like doing this first, as it puts a good base, and I can slowly build on top of it, and also just erase through the middle as the highlight of where the light is actually coming from, just like that. It makes it also seem more natural. There we go. And you just slowly bring it, very slowly. Obviously you don't want to rush things like this, otherwise it could look messy, but this should be fine. And then you do the same thing on this side. You also still want to show that it's sharp, very pointy. Just like that. And then let's just clean up the sides. And just make the highlight apparent again. And boom! Now you could really tell that it curves inwards based on the light. It still follows the same rule, but it's dependent on the shape, which is the cone. As for this, all the gradients were in a straight line. Same for the sphere, how it was curved, the gradients. And this one, since it's triangular like this, it kind of wraps in like that. This right here is just example, but I'm just trying to bring in all the components we learned and how it could really be used for something that you can make yourself. And obviously I'm not the best at this, but it shows how right here, the sphere can be used, and based on your shading, it can really define a picture. Just like that. And then we have the box/square right over here, and also the cylinder right here as the neck, as well as the arms, and then also the cone as it's the wrist and it slowly narrows down. And when you look at something like this, when you look at this whole thing, the combination, you would think of it as a person or as a body of someone. However, this was made out of imagination, and it's just through the connection of different shapes. And all I've thought of it was different shapes being stuck together. And that's how an artist should see things, as it can really help make things come together. Now this is one of my drawings, okay? And while making this, you can now, as a more developed artist, you can clearly see a few shapes just right off the bat. Firstly is just the helmet itself. It's a really big circle, okay? And then also towards the chin, it can be broken down into triangles and squares, and then the neck being a cylinder. And also with these ears, or such wings, where it can be broken down to boxes and triangles, okay? And with this, the rules of shading also apply. And look at the helmet firstly. As it's curving down, you see things like right over here, as the light source is coming from the front, or like from the front side-ish, where one side is prioritized more, and the part that pokes out the most is receiving the most light, and also from the sides over here. However, when you look at the other side, since it's a curved object, yet with the middle, there's a solid, like a square type of sudden rough turn edge, it leaves the other half of the drawing slightly more darker. Also, looking at these side pieces, since they're flat straight pieces, they receive light just as much, and they have a more consistent color similar to a square. So here's what I want you to do after this video. I want you to grab something like a mug and just break it down into pieces, into these shapes. Remember the sphere logic, the cone logic, square logic, and cylinder logic. All the shading. Obviously, it's one set idea of the value scale and shading. However, they have slightly different features, but try to get these random objects you have around you and just break it down into shapes and then shade them and see what you get. And once you do that and add the details after you're done, you'll realize that you've made something so much more detailed and realistic than you ever have before in such a short span of time by learning the most basic yet most fundamental things in art. Thank you for watching, and in the next video I'll be covering some of the techniques I use while drawing. And please like, share, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.